Welcome to Together for Good, brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio. Together for Good exists to recognize and uplift the many people working together for the good of San Antonio and the surrounding communities. Now here's the host of Together for Good, Cody Knowlton.
Hey, listeners, we had such a great conversation with the Alzheimer's Association that we decided we couldn't cover all the information we wanted in just one episode. So the following is the first half of a fascinating discussion of the effects, issues, and ramifications of Alzheimer's disease. Thanks for joining us. Welcome back, everybody, to Together for Good. This show is being brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio as a part of our mission to honor our Lord and Savior Jesus Christ and our Baptist heritage by encouraging and funding health-related programs at area nonprofits and churches. Through Together for Good, we connect our audience to the great work these organizations do in our community. Today, we're tackling a big topic, something that affects so many of us in our communities and families. It seems like we all know someone who is dealing with an Alzheimer's diagnosis, either their own or a close family member. Billions of dollars are poured into medical studies searching for a cure, and a wide array of industries are trying to figure out how to mitigate the incredible social cost of the disease. We're joined today by a couple of folks who know a lot about this disease and its effect on individuals, their families, and the wider community. Ginny Funk is the Director of Programs for the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association, and her 24-year anniversary with the organization will be this April. Yay, Ginny. She supervises 3 care and support staff folks throughout the chapter and oversees all of the care and support programs for people living with dementia and their caregivers. She went through this journey with her mother, who passed in 2019, and now her dad has been diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease. Also in studio here today is Blain Johnson, and Blain is a top-producing realtor in San Antonio with J.B. Goodwin Realtors. He was a caregiver to his mother, who was diagnosed with Alzheimer's disease and lost her battle in July of just last year. He has been on the board of directors for the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association for the last 3 years and is an active participant in events and a co-sponsor of a major fundraising event annually in support of Walk to End Alzheimer's. Now, before we get started with the interview, we do also want to congratulate Ginny and Blain and the entire organization for being the recipients of Baptist Health Foundation's 2024 Community Choice Award in the Responsive Grants category. That honor was given to them in recognition of their outstanding and important work. It was actually awarded based on a vote from other nonprofit organizations, which means even among their peers, Alzheimer's Association stands out as an excellent and impactful organization. And we're just very excited to have them receive it and be here today for us to say congratulations again, because we did it in December, but that's been a long time ago. So it's great to get you guys together and to have this great conversation. So thank you for your time. Welcome.
Oh, thank you so much. We're very, very glad to be able to be here with you and to share information, and most definitely to say sincere thank you for all of the support.
Awesome. Well, let's just get started here. I mean, what is the prevalence of Alzheimer's in our area? Give us the scope of your work, Ginny.
Absolutely. So I'll make it broad first. There's over 6 million people in America who have Alzheimer's, and that doesn't even include all the other dementias. Now, in Texas, we know there are at least 460,000 people who are living with Alzheimer's disease. And if we break it down even now by county, we have county statistics where we know at least over 33,000 people live with Alzheimer's disease who are age 65 and over. And number of caregivers is over 1 million in the state of Texas. So we know that this disease impacts so many people. And we also know these numbers are low estimates because it's estimated that half of the people who have Alzheimer's disease aren't even diagnosed yet.
I can connect to that. My mother had dementia, and I'm not sure ever really got the Alzheimer's designation. She passed away last year in January, and then my dad had Parkinson's and passed away in September. So I understand, and that leads me to the next question, which I actually had. This was my question. You know, what is the difference between Alzheimer's and dementia?
That is the most commonly asked question that we get. And so very, very, very common. The best thing we do is visually think about an umbrella. The top of the umbrella, that umbrella term is dementia. And dementia is basically describing a collection of symptoms that are cognitive loss, functional, behavioral, that are caused by a specific disease. And Alzheimer's disease is the most common disease that causes those symptoms, those dementia symptoms. The other most common causes of dementia symptoms are frontotemporal, Lewy body disease, vascular disease. All of these cause dementia symptoms, but dementia it basically has to be driven by an underlying progressive neurodegenerative disease. So the long handle that comes down from the umbrella, we call that Alzheimer's disease because Alzheimer's causes 60 to 80% of all dementia symptoms that are out there. So just think about dementia as a big, broad term, but beyond that, we need to know what's causing that because there are so many things that cause dementia symptoms, and it might be something that's treatable and reversible, unlike Alzheimer's and the other irreversible causes of dementia.
Exactly. So, Ginny, I've always wondered, where did Alzheimer's come from? I mean, my mother had it. My mother-in-law had it. I'm not sure that question ever came up. It's just kind of an accepted naming, if you will. So what's the history behind Alzheimer's?
It is. And, it's not the easiest word to spell or say. So this disease has been around for over 100 years. And when you are so brilliant and you discover something, they name it after you. So back in 1906, actually, Dr. Alois Alzheimer was a physician who was taking care of individuals and started noticing a lot of behavioral type things. It was really kind of a scientific breakthrough back then where they could, after someone passed away, look at brain tissue under a microscope and actually see that there was damage in the brain of some of his patients. And so from that, they actually named this brain disease after Dr. Alzheimer. So it became Alzheimer's disease. That's how long it's been around. But it was so many years later that they were calling it hardening of the arteries, if you remember that.
Yep.
Or they would say all kinds of things, crazy or psychotic or psychosis or just all kinds of names. But now we know that actually back then it was Alzheimer's disease. It's just that it wasn't necessarily being called by that. It's been around that long.
Wow. Interesting. Mm-hmm. Jenny, how old do you have to be to have Alzheimer's? Is there a minimum age that, industry standards have shown to be kind of the possibility point?
Right. Historically, when you hear the word Alzheimer's, people do think of older adults or old people. But what we know is that Alzheimer's disease is not a normal part of aging. However, aging is the greatest risk factor for developing Alzheimer's disease. And what that means is, for most people, the symptoms of Alzheimer's disease don't start to show until 65 and older. However, many scientists believe that it actually begins much younger in the brain. And it's just that the symptoms for most people don't start to show until after 65. Now, we also know that there are people who are younger than 65 who have younger onset or early onset Alzheimer's disease. And those are people in their 40s and 50s and early 60s. The youngest person that I ever met was 49, I believe, which is absolutely incredible. Just incredibly young, but it is more rare. It's definitely more rare.
So if you get diagnosed at that age, are you going to live, 20, 30 years with that? Or is the time progression about the same as if you got it when you were 65 or 70?
Well, that's about the other most commonly asked question. How long is this going to go on for? Generally, we often see that younger individuals go through the stages of the disease quicker than those who are even in their 80s or mid-80s. But that's not always what happens. For every single person, we say if you've seen one person with Alzheimer's, you've seen one person. Every single person has a little bit different path in how fast or how slow it progresses. But generally, younger individuals will progress quicker than older individuals.
Interesting. What are some of the early warning signs as our listeners are out there hearing this and maybe wondering and maybe have somebody that they know? I mean, when should family members or close friends start considering lifestyle changes for their loved one?
Absolutely. So we could do a whole show on the 10 warning signs. We have an excellent class and we have this on our website. But when you start to notice that your loved one is doing something then very different, if it's an everyday task, you walk into the bathroom and see that they're putting toothpaste on a hairbrush. Something is very out of order there. So difficulty with everyday tasks. Certainly memory and short-term memory, that often comes up as one of the biggest symptoms or signs to really kind of be concerned about. Not long-term memories, but more of not being able to remember something that just happened. That, I mean, most of us have we forget why we walk into a room or where we laid those keys down. But this is much more serious, where it's symptoms that interfere with daily living. Language is an area where you start to see individuals have problems with staying with a conversation or being very confused, very disoriented, not being able to solve everyday problems that, I'm hungry, I'm going to go into the kitchen, start making a sandwich, and they start to put food in the wrong place. You just start to notice that there are things that they are doing that are out of order that don't make a lot of sense. And our recommendation is, it's very easy to be in denial, but don't blow those things off. Make sure and get them checked out and share them with your physician, share them with your family. Because again, those dementia symptoms, they could be caused by a whole variety of different things.
I tell you, for my mother, it was when she could not remember how to get to Walgreens that she had been to for 50 years. That's when we decided perhaps she shouldn't be doing any more driving. Yes. And then it became, after that, more downhill connections. So have there been any major scientific breakthroughs that you're monitoring?
Oh my gosh. So our organization is heavily involved in research because ultimately our mission is to find a cure and be done with this terrible disease of Alzheimer's and all the other irreversible dementias. So right now, for the first time ever, we are actually in an era of treatment. There have been, in just the last 5 years, treatments for Alzheimer's disease and for people with MCI, mild cognitive impairment. So the scientific breakthroughs of having these treatments FDA approved and then going through the advocacy of trying to get coverage, because they are very expensive. So right now we have Leqembi and we have Kisunla, which 5 years ago we didn't have. There were long-term studies that produced these treatments. Now here's the key though. The studies were done on individuals with MCI or in early stages. And so they truly only will benefit individuals who are in the early stages of the disease. So as a community, we are tasked with getting to people sooner so that we can get a diagnosis sooner, so that they can get on treatment sooner. Historically, people don't generally sometimes get a diagnosis until their loved one is already into the middle stages, because that's when, the reality of this is really happening. We can't be in denial anymore over this. There's too many serious things happening. So yes, the scientific breakthroughs are just absolutely incredible right now, and there's more coming down the pipeline. So we are very encouraged. We're more hopeful than ever, but it's a really interesting time for sure.
Now, you mentioned MCI, which stands for mild cognitive impairment, and so as I understand it, that may be kind of the first step, and it's more kind of, I just don't remember names like I used to, things like that. But they're still full functioning, driving, things like that. Is that a good description of MCI?
Yes, okay. Yes, absolutely. And it's very interesting because if we can get to people even sooner who have MCI, there are things that we can do to slow down the progression to where not everyone who has MCI is going to progress into having Alzheimer's disease. But everyone who has Alzheimer's disease went through that MCI stage. So focusing on, again, we've got to take care of everyone, no matter what stage they are in with this, and their caregivers and their loved ones. But if for everyone who is aging, which means every single one of us are at risk, for all of us, we definitely do need to be able to get to people when things are just starting, because that is where a lot of the treatments are going to be focused For sure.
Hey, listeners, if you're just now joining us, this is Together for Good, brought to you by Baptist Health Foundation of San Antonio. I'm your host, Cody Knowlton, and today we're talking about Alzheimer's disease with Ginny Funk and Blain Johnson of the San Antonio and South Texas chapter of the Alzheimer's Association. So glad to have y'all here today. So do you think crisis, Ginny, is the correct word? I mean, when talking about the growing number of Alzheimer's cases in the U.S., I remember Dr. Henrich from UT Health was in studio last year, maybe a year before that, and he talked about this tsunami that was coming. Is that still the case? You know, a tsunami
Yes.
crisis?
Yes,
you know?
Absolutely. The numbers continue to rise, and we know that they're just going to exponentially keep rising because, again, the number one risk factor is age. And like it or not, every single one of us is aging, so that increases our risk. But there are so many things happening in research and clinical trials and different studies, again, how you can lower your risk. So, yes, the crisis, I'm sorry to say this, but there's not enough curse words to describe how bad these diseases are. They're so difficult. And the more people that are coming that are going to have these diseases, but there are also things that we know now we can do to lower our risk. And there are so many support services available now more than ever that it's being able to share this information is it's so important. So thank you.
Well, and the biggest thing y'all do is let people know you're not alone. And I think early on in this, before the Alzheimer's Association, other groups really became as sophisticated as they are now, it could very well be a very lonely, isolated kind of situation where there weren't a lot of answers. There weren't a lot of, support groups, caregiver groups, activities, events, things like that. And so what y'all do is come alongside folks and just say, we understand. I mean, the three of us sitting here today can easily connect to, the Alzheimer's situation because we've had loved ones. Ginny, we're familiar with the mental memory aspect of Alzheimer's, but can you tell us a little more about the physical changes? For instance, how can Alzheimer's be a cause of death?
That's generally when we do classes, we do a lot of education out in the community. And when that comes up, when we talk about the different stages, early, middle, late, that Alzheimer's disease is the sixth leading cause of death in the United States, we do definitely get some very surprised faces. How can, especially if it's just memory related, well, we know it's actually this disease and the other diseases destroy brain cells. And as it progresses throughout the brain, it continues to destroy more and more. So if you think about all the organs in our body, our brain is the most important. It's telling everything what to do. So as people get into later stages, the symptoms start to interfere with most daily activities up to the point of all daily activities. So how the brain tells the body how to walk. It starts to not be able to do that. How to talk. Communication continues to keep changing and changing. And eventually, towards the end stages, if someone goes through all the stages, the brain actually can't tell the body how to swallow. And that's what we have to have in order to be able to continue. We have to have liquids and food. And so a lot of times what would happen over the years is pneumonia would be listed as the cause of death. But what we know now is that actually it was Alzheimer's disease that was causing, if an individual had this brain disease or the others, it actually reaches that point where the brain is not able to tell the body how to function. And so it does cause death, and pneumonia may be listed as the second part. The other thing is that the body becomes very vulnerable to other infections, and oftentimes there are comorbidities of other diseases as well. So all of that contributes to this being truly a disease that can last for some people over 20 years. It's hard to even imagine that, but it can happen. And for a lot of people, they do reach that point of going through all of the stages into the end stages where it does cause, it's a 24-hour disease. Even people who are sometimes even in the early to middle stages start needing 24-hour oversight because of safety issues. So,
Ginny, for those that are taking care of someone in their home currently, they may get to a point where they're having to make a decision. Do I keep doing this and helping my loved one? I have a job. They can't be by themselves. I'm not a trained professional. But then on the opposite side, putting my loved one in a facility, in a place, is a challenge. It could also be a financial hardship. Tell us how the Alzheimer's Association navigates those kind of questions when they come in.
Every day. We do have a 24-hour helpline that is staffed by master's level clinicians and higher. So no matter where you are, no matter how rural or if you live in the big city of San Antonio, we ask people, call our helpline. And just like you said, start sharing what you are going through, and we can talk with you through how do you even make these decisions? How do you know where to go? How do you know? We have to be very careful. We can't recommend one over the other. But what we do is these are the questions you want to ask. These are the things you want to ask for. We also very much help with the emotional side of all of this. How do you even come to that point where maybe you have reached the point where you do need additional care, either coming into the home or having to move into a care community? How do you, it is by far one of the most difficult things that a family can go through. But we also are there to help with when it reaches that point where you can no longer do the 24/7 and you need staff to help you with that. We can help with all of that. We can help with resources that are available. It is expensive. Alzheimer's is considered to be about the most expensive disease in the United States. So it is very serious. But we recommend that you call us, call our helpline so that we can talk through all of those things. Also, if you're at home and you're struggling, how do I get my loved one to bathe when they haven't, and it's been 3 weeks, or how do I get them to take medications if they're refusing? All of those things, we have tips and suggestions, and we're very good listeners, but also can try to help with those kind of situations. It comes up all the time.
Well, and even for that person who does manage to move their loved one to a care facility, but then that loved one, it just doesn't work there. I mean, they're still with it, I guess, enough to know I don't want to be here and start making all kinds of problems. And it can get very messy, very complicated.
Absolutely. So. We recommend please call us because we, as an organization, can help with those things. We also talk about, realistic expectations and yes, you don't ever need to put up with bad care, but you also, if you walk in and see that your loved one is wearing 2 mismatched colors of socks, that maybe that's not your battle to, you know what I mean? So exactly. So we can help with all of those things. And it is very difficult. My father is in a care community right now. And, even knowing all of these things, I know it can be really, really difficult, but you do not have to do this alone. There is support available and there are people to talk to. Mm-hmm.
Blain, we're going to get to you.
It's okay.
We're just very, very close. So one more question for Ginny, because I do think this transitions well to you, Blain. Ginny, what drew you to this? I mean, how did you get involved with the Alzheimer's Association? And just tell us a little bit about your background.
Sure. I became a volunteer. Our walk to end Alzheimer's, way back then it was called Memory Walk. And I became a volunteer with one of my closest friends, and we volunteered for the walk. We volunteered to have dogs at the walk and to have kids at the walk and really try to grow families coming to our walk. And so for 3 years I was a volunteer, and then the director at that time called and said, "Hey, we actually have a paid staff position. Would you like to come aboard?" And I said, I'll be right there. I worked in nursing homes. I worked in memory care communities, assisted livings, and I really found that working with individuals, especially older adults, was just my thing. And it was kind of odd. My friends, not everyone likes to do that, but I found that was where I wanted to be. And so coming to the association was just a great opportunity, and I have stayed ever since. It happened right under my nose with my own mother. I understand about denial. I understand about there's just a lot of things. So then I went on this journey with her, and that made me even more motivated. And now with my dad, it's been a year, and that just motivates me even more. So I just think you are called to this either as a volunteer or however you get involved. My goodness, we have Blain, who's an outstanding board member. We have amazing board members, and all of us together with volunteers we are doing everything we can, but we are just barely scratching the surface of reaching all the people out there who need support. So again, appreciate this opportunity.
Yeah. Well, let me say thank you for listening to that voice, probably from the Lord, saying this is your calling and this is what you need to do. And, so many of us want to turn another way and say, that's not what I want to do. I've got bigger plans, God. And you listened to the call and you followed it. So way to go. Thank you that you did. Hey, listeners, we're so glad you joined us today for this first part of the conversation we had with the Alzheimer's Association. So we hope you'll join us next week for part 2 of a continued conversation with Ginny and Blain and the Alzheimer's Association.
Thank you for tuning in today for Together for Good. We hope you've been encouraged, uplifted, and inspired. Until our next time together, may the Lord bless and keep you. And in all things, to God be the glory.